Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Oh, it's your old friend Lisa.
Hey, hi Lisa, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We're very well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I think we've all got a glass of wine in hand and we're ready to have a great discussion. So I'm feeling great. And as you mentioned, yes, a friend of many, many years. So thank you for joining us on the podcast. I'm super excited to be talking about two of my favorite things. One is great friends, and the second thing is yoga. Yippee!
Yeah,
Gareth's nodding.
I'm nodding. I'm just sitting here, just enjoying my wine.
You're just drinking the wine. I'm just here for the wine.
I'm along for the fun. I like fun. See, Nikki sometimes says, "Oh, I don't know, like sometimes evening podcast. It's the end of the day. We got to record." I'm like, "Yeah, but wine. Like, it's not as appropriate to drink wine at 10:30 in the morning while you're podcasting." So here we go.
Oh, too funny.
There you go.
So if you are listening in, this is Lisa Greenbaum, who is a huge mentor of mine. The key ingredient to how I approach yoga, how I teach yoga, and just the way I approach yoga as a whole, knowing it is more than just a class. So I want to say thank you for starting my yoga journey and helping me to continue and grow through it. So I just wanted that officially on record. So thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Yay. And it kind of leads us nicely into, hey, tell us what you are currently doing now, Lisa.
All right. Well, I always have like a million things that I'm doing at the same time. But my biggest and most exciting venture that I'm doing currently is that I have just launched my own yoga education school.
Woohoo!
And I'm specifically calling it a yoga education school as opposed to a teacher training school. Yes, I'm going to certify teachers. I will be certifying teachers, absolutely. But yoga education, because there are so many people out there that want to know more about yoga and don't necessarily want to commit to an entire training time-wise or financially. Or maybe there's just certain segments of the yoga practice that they would love to just know more. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've really done with the foundational offerings of my school. And then there will be so many more to come because I will not be able to just sit still with the 5 courses I've created so far. In fact, I already have like the layouts of 3 more that are coming, but we'll wait for that. So yeah, that's basically where a lot of my attention is going. As you know, I've taught yoga and been in the fitness industry for it's almost 21 years, which is a bit frightening. Isn't that the champagne birthday, 21?
Yeah, sure.
Well, that's about the same time for me. So I feel like we need to have a bottle of champagne or 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been a lot of drinking conversations on this podcast so far.
Well, it's Friday and it's after 8:00. So, you know.
True.
That does happen. So going on 21 years of teaching, and I have taught yoga-based practices the entire time. And so I have aged 21 years through that process. My clients have aged 21 years through that process. But it has, through that journey really opened my eyes to the evolution of the practice here in North America, which as it became really popularized sort of in the late 90s, early 2000s, was very physically based. And the physical practice of yoga is really beautiful. But we call doing yoga, but we can't do yoga. Yoga is actually a state of being. Yoga is when we are quiet and still in the mind. That is what yoga is. The poses, the meditation, the breathing, that's all the practice of yoga. So, the focus of the education school is to start to flip the narrative on that and to allow anybody that has interest in yoga, from just their own personal practice to maybe teaching to somewhere in between, to all of a sudden I took all these trainings and maybe I am going to be a teacher. Sometimes we don't know what will happen, but that's really the main idea behind it.
I love that. And I know that there's people listening right now that are just doing the same thing that I did. Go back, Lisa, and can you just repeat again the starting at the statement of I'm going to do yoga, and just explain that again, because you articulated it so well, and so many people are like, oh, it's stretching. So I just want everyone to hear that again, because it's so important.
All right. So we do it, right? We say, come to yoga class, come and do yoga as teachers. That's what we'll even say, right? What are you doing tonight? I'm going to yoga. But yoga isn't a destination. It's not, it's nothing that's happening outside of us. Yoga is the moment where we are quiet and still in our mind. So when I say that, that means that everybody has experienced yoga in some capacity. There is a moment in time at some point in your life where your mind is really quiet. And often those are like, because we are busy and our minds tend to be swirling all over, and then our minds are swirling all over anyways. But, we walk around through the park in nature and we just listen to a bird and we're quiet, or we're watching the water at the beach and we're just quiet and still. Those are all moments of yoga. However, when we start to practice yoga, the poses of yoga, which do help us stretch for sure and help us get stronger, and when we practice the breathing exercises, and when we start to practice meditation more, it allows us to create those moments of stillness that start to last longer. It's like a muscle. So we use weights to increase our body strength. And of course, we'll use certain yoga poses to increase our body strength. But spending more time in silence and stillness and practicing that time also works that muscle. And so when we start to do that more often, everything just gets a little bit slower. That racing mind where you're trying to focus, but everything's still spinning around because you have so much to do. The dimmer switch, it doesn't turn off, but the dimmer switch slows down where you're like, oh, right, that's the important thing. That one just keeps repeating 17 times, but it's still the only one thing. That doesn't matter because it happened in the past. And so you can start to really focus. And that's what I mean by slowing down. And then you become more present. And then through being more present, you become more grateful and compassionate and all the other wonderful things. So
I love that.
Go.
And I have to just stay on this point just for a few more moments, because this is so important. I feel like there is a lot of people leaning towards the intensity. I want to find a difficult yoga class. I want to find the one where the poses, and I'm going to get into the deepest pose
yoga
for the longest.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there is a place, and I'm no expert, but what I will share is, having taught Pilates for the last 15 years, is there is a very much there's a bit of I feel that there's traditional Pilates and these are the only things, and I'm a purist and I'll only do these mat exercises in the same sequence. And people will ask me that when they don't do my class. And my answer always is, Pilates is not a set of exercises. It's a set of principles. So very different from yoga. And that's another key point, but another conversation is it's a set of principles that we apply to movement. And my joke is always, I can get you to stand on your head and it be Pilates. If you are aligned properly, breathing properly, you're centered. It's a set of principles. So that's my way of basically saying I do what I like and I make it fit. But isn't that exactly what we're talking about? Like, it's just that we're just practicing movement. Yeah,
it is. And, when, as you were saying that, I was thinking about, when I really started deepening my yoga journey, I also taught body jam for 15 years, right? And I always said it was my yang to my yin. And anyone who came to my body jam class couldn't believe I taught yoga. And anyone who came to my yoga class couldn't believe I taught body jam. It's like, it's alter ego. But from deepening my understanding of yoga, how I taught body jam completely changed. Because it's a high intensity, like crazy all out dance program, but the language that I use to coach my students changed. Same class, pre-choreographed class, same music, same high energy, same like go for it. But, it was also that it was very similar to what you just said, just the way you explain it and coach it. All of a sudden body jam became yoga. All of a sudden cycling becomes yoga, all of a sudden running, right? So, and that's really what yoga is meant to do. It's supposed to really lend itself out into all aspects.
Yeah, I can agree with you more. I found that too in other things I was teaching a body pump for many years in a weight-based program. You kind of joked about lifting the weights, and that's how we build, strength and that muscle memory and the ability to quickly adapt into a moment from high repetition. But then layering in that yoga piece, like, are you mindful as you do those reps? Are you present? Are you really feeling it? Or are you just going through the motions? So yes, you actually really hit a moment for me there too. Whether I was doing it consciously or unconsciously, I don't know, but it starts to have a ripple effect into other things that you do. So even if you're not a fitness instructor, right, it will add that element of being present, being mindful in your day-to-day job, maybe being with your kids, with your parents, just going through daily life. And actually, I'll share the story. When my mum came to visit a few weeks ago, and she's like, you just talk to anybody. Like, I'll just be in a store and I'll be like, hey, how's your day? Or rather than trying to find something in a store, I'll always speak to the person in the store. Like,
always.
What?
I thought that was a fitness instructor thing too, because I do it too.
I don't know if it's
random conversations with people,
or just being present in the moment, or just being more connected,
holding space for people. Yeah, it's your ability to hold space for people.
Yeah, as I think for a lot of people that might be, that's embarrassing, or I'm too shy, or I'm sure some of it, yes, is characteristics and probably what I do for a living, but I just, there's time and space for me to do that. And I could now not imagine not doing it. Does that make sense? Yeah. And you agree too. You're kind of nodding along, and
I see it all the time. So no, I get it. I want to, and great points. There's like the perfect direction, not a direction change at all, but something that I think is really important. You spoke to the coaching, Lisa, and saying that, when you're teaching a dance-based program, when you're teaching some, a weight-based class, the way we speak and communicate changes based on the other things we teach. And I experienced this from many things, from coaching, like behavioral change and nutrition and Pilates, and how that changes the way I teach a squat. I think that's really important. And what we want to dive into is kind of a little bit of your, I hesitate to call it a speciality, but your area of expertise within yoga particularly, and how that comment about coaching differently in the language that you use affects that. So, and I know that Nicky's got some great points for this as well, but tell us a little bit about trauma-informed yoga and kind of where that speciality feeds into everything you're doing.
Absolutely. So there's many layers to this. And one of the things that when I was putting my curriculum together as well for my school and for the 200-hour program, which is the introductory sort of set of 5 trainings, is that it has a trauma-informed base. And the other element is that the whole program is meant to enrich our mental well-being. So with that being said, all of yoga, when it's practiced, and I hate to use the word correctly because that's sort of an unfair word, but it goes back to, if we're really honoring the practice of yoga and its depth of history, that yoga is a state of being, it's naturally going to help our mental well-being. And so with that, how it helps our mental well-being is because it balances our nervous system. And so when we have experienced trauma, layers of trauma, and the fact is that all of us have experienced trauma in some shape or form. Of course, there are extreme forms of trauma, without question. But we've all had moments of shock and disbelief and pain, physical, emotional, and all of these experiences imprint on our nervous system. And so depending on the nature, and this is the number one thing when it comes to trauma, first of all, is that it is subjective. The only person that gets to decide if this experience was traumatic or not is you. There is no, yes, there is a DSM, diagnostic statistical manual, that will go through and explain when we start to move more into PTSD. But how an event lands on your nervous system, and it's not conscious, it's unconscious, and a lot of the times it is also a result of all of your past experiences too. What was your childhood like? What was growing up like? What was life like with the people that were meant to be taking care of you? So going back into childhood, right? And then as we get into adulthood, relationships, work life, our economic status, all of those things play into it. And then we start to layer on other sort of subconscious behaviors as well, body image, addictions. There, like, we could go on and on and on around all of these things. The fact is that once again, all of these experiences land on our nervous system. And then on top of that, we have busy jobs and busy lives. And then we have children who have their own personalities and their own stage of growth, depending on where they are in their growing years, right? From toddlers to, not sleeping, to toddlers, to yelling no, to preteens, to teenagers, to 20s and 30s, and they're still, acting like teenagers. And then as we start to hit this middle life section, we not only have babies and children, then we have our elderly parents to take care of, and we have our full-time jobs. And so everything starts to get compressed, and all of this chronic stress starts to rise. And if we have had previous experiences of traumatic events, this makes us really susceptible to anxiety, depression, and even the smallest things set us off. And then look, all of us just came out of what basically was a 2-year pandemic, right? Which impacted all of us in different ways. So when this is started to move through into my teaching over the last few years, and this is definitely the foundation of how I am going to be sharing my teachings as I launch into my education school, is using these practices to balance the nervous system so that we can start to come back and feel a little more connected to ourselves. And so there's so many layers to this. And there is one of the modules of training that I've created is completely dedicated to being trauma informed and actually getting a trauma informed certificate if you work with the general public in any way that might help you have it, be more trauma informed. So whether you teach group fitness classes, whether you work as a counselor, I'm trying to think of all the different places where you could use this. You could work in an animal shelter or homeless shelters. There's so many different places where this would add to your benefit. When you start to understand how the brain and the nervous system are impacted by trauma, by some of the ways I just said, but when you actually start to understand the science behind it, and that it is truly a survival mechanism, it is completely unconscious. We don't make these decisions that I'm going to walk into the grocery store and scream at the cashier because she's not accepting my coupon that expired a week ago that I was insistent was going to be fine, right? But we've all had those moments, right? And so when we're clear and we're grounded, we're like, oh gosh, I would never do that. That's such a horrible thing to do. But when we're at our max and the littlest thing sets us off, it's hard to control. And it's not our logical brain that's doing that. It's that subconscious survival, because there's all this built up of emotion and stress and it doesn't know where to go. So again, coming back to understanding how the nervous system processes stress and how it can regulate stress, and then practices. Again, that's really what the yoga system was built on. Practices to help us manage and cope with chronic stress, which is really just, I remember when I first learned this, when I started studying yoga philosophy, and I think this is what completely made me just drop everything and say, okay, I got to devote my life to this, is that literally 3,500 years ago, in a text that was created, I call it a text, but it wasn't actually, we couldn't have books back then, they weren't invented yet, but it was an oral tradition of the philosophy that got formed, which was the Sutras of Patanjali. And he's talking about chronic stress and the effects of anxiety. And literally this is like 1450 BCE. So it's part of our human condition, right? We blame technology and all this other stuff, but it's part of our human condition as well. So all of that knowledge, all of a sudden we have this awareness. And then from that, we have deeper levels of compassion for ourselves. We start looking around at our family members and we have so much compassion for them. We start to realize that, you know, the reason that, you know, my mom gets passive aggressive with me is not because she's trying to pull a fast one and, you know, make me feel guilty, but because that's her sort of reset subconsciously, because that's how she was taught to deal with stress, by basically pretending it doesn't exist. And so they end up as backhand comments, right? And that's just a small thing, but there's so many layers and elements. But yeah, just by understanding whether you've experienced trauma, whether, you know, a loved one has experienced trauma, whether you're working with clients that have experienced trauma, just having that awareness completely reshapes your perspective for how you look at people. It's really powerful.
So much to think about there, Lisa, from so many different angles and different people's perspectives. And what I really like was at the beginning that you really broke down the word trauma, because I think initially, you know, you see it on a piece of paper and you're like, oh, well, I haven't gone through any trauma. Because we think trauma is an, I don't know, natural disaster, things exploding, things catching, like devastation. But actually, no, trauma could just be going through pregnancy. Trauma could be, you know, the loss of a job, being made redundant, something like that. Yeah. It really is, well, I guess it's relative to everybody in some ways.
Yeah.
And you said that at the beginning. And I think once we kind of peel back those layers, and we let go a bit of ego, which you mentioned is that protective system, right? We all have that. Once we peel that back, we're like, actually, yeah, I could deal with this. So if somebody is listening now, let's say they're not a fitness professional, that you're not a yoga teacher, but they identify themselves within that description, the description of what trauma is, or just things bubbling to the surface, what would you recommend for them in regards to yoga and mindfulness? Like, what would be a great first step?
Okay. So first of all, there is a circle and a cycle of healing. And part of that cycle of healing involves being able to articulate what happened or what's happening and be able to process that cognitively. So being able to talk about it. And that's what psychotherapists and psychologists, that's what their job is. Okay. But there's another half to this, which is allowing the trauma and the stress to move through our body. So we might be able to, and so we fall into all sorts of different spectrums on that circle of healing. And I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, because yoga isn't the answer. It's just part of the answer.
Sure.
And so we fall into these different areas on the circle. So some of us can articulate all our pain. We can talk about it, but yet we still have tremendous tension in the jaw. We can't let go of that clamping of the jaw every night we're sleeping, or we have tremendous back pain, or digestion. Right? Those are all of those. There's so many different ways that stress manifests, but those are often the most common. And so being able to go through a movement practice. So what that movement practice would be is generally slow flow. So movement is involved. and lots of breath. So all of our poses need to be fueled by breath. We need to be able to take big, full, deep breaths in every movement and posture we're doing. Another technique that I use, which when I was teaching classes, this was the class that I was teaching with you for a while. I call it cultivating yin, but it's really about tapping into our parasympathetic nervous system. So it's not, if we could just go on, off, on, off, on, off, well, life would be a very different experience, right? But, because we carry so much stress, we're like, okay, now it's time to go to sleep. And then we just lie there like ding, 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 ding.
Mm-hmm.
So we need the dimmer switch to slowly turn down. And that's really what it's about. And so when we start to go through our flows and our movements, rather than, we want to stretch, we want to feel sensation in the body, but rather than pushing to 110% effort, we're sticking closer to 50 or 60%. Instead of coming into a pose and holding it and almost shaking because we're holding our breath, we're doing like these little micro movements. So we're trying to find ease, right? Like playing with stretch response so that the body isn't seizing up every time we're trying to move in a little bit deeper into a stretch. So, and in that way, we're starting to teach the nervous system that, oh, I don't have to carry the world on my shoulders. It's actually not helping anybody or anything or me. And so over time, that tension from the body will start to release. And it's a practice. It has to be done with consistency. So it's not just do a 6-week course and you're good. Yeah, after 6 weeks, hopefully you should feel really good. But then you take 6 weeks off and you're going to feel like crap again. You got to keep going.
Right.
But even
surprise.
Even once a week of a practice like that can do so much. And then all of a sudden you start to crave that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I've been thinking about meditating for a long time. And all of a sudden you're pulling out those apps and trying 5 or 10 minute meditation. And then all of a sudden a shift comes from that. So it's really multi-layered and there's a lot of techniques. But that I think is the most generalized piece. So like I said, we need to be able to talk and articulate and be able to move. So just to kind of finish that point on that circle is that, so a lot of people can talk about it, no problem, but still carry all the tension. A lot of people can't talk about it. And some of that is definitely protection. And some of it is because when we have a traumatic event that happens, because our survival brain is only focused on our survival, our emotional brain, which is where our memory is as well, when a traumatic event happens, if we can't make sense of what's happening to us and we don't have a memory, so our brain is searching to have a memory, does this make sense? Have I been through this before? Then depending on the caliber of what's happening, the emotional memory centers just shut down. And so we go into pure survival mode. And so we could literally shut down, we could faint, we could freeze, we could run away. And often in our more modern times, it's more of the shutdown, the freeze. And so then when we try to recall and try and process what happened, we literally were like, I don't know. I don't actually know what happened. We hear that all the time with car accidents. It just happened out of nowhere. Right. Mm-hmm. And so by being able to go through the movement, then safely, what we're actually doing is by kind of resetting our nervous system through the movement, all of a sudden, some of the memories come back, and it comes back it's controlled by you. It's not this hypnotic state where someone's pulling. It's you're going through movement, and then a little bit of a flash of memory might come, or a little bit of emotion might come. And then it gets to a point as you continue to go through the movement, where you're like, okay, I'm ready. Not, okay, you're ready. No, I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about this. I'm ready to move, continue to move. And that's that at the base end of being trauma informed. That's what it's about. It's about the person that has experienced this when they're ready to move through, and it's all done on their time. So yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah,
definitely.
It really is. And it just makes me think, we're just talking to, many people that are tuned into the show now and are listening, that are our kind of our membership base, and people that are listening because they're also busy parents and professionals, they want to move a bit more, they want to feel good. And the reason we have that as our kind of, our niche is exactly that, because we want people to move more, because it isn't just, I want to get strong, I want to lose weight. Understanding that there's so much deeper to it, that understanding that, and it kind of, for us, it almost takes the expectation away of those things. Just move more, because when you move more, you are going to feel better, as you said, because you're going to go in that cycle and you want to feel good. And understanding as well, like, Nikki mentioned it, you can go through pregnancy, you can go through the change in your life as a busy parent. At some point, you weren't a parent, so you became one, and then your life completely changed. And we don't, I definitely don't do this. We don't take that into account. We just kind of continue like, oh, well, there's another person here now. Going to figure it out. But it does completely change everything, the way you look at things, the way you communicate, your life. And that in itself can be traumatic to a lot of people, right? And without us knowing it. And I think when we step in with that idea of moving without expectation, is that will help us. Because the reason people get stuck is because they're stressed and they're anxious, and then their thought is, well, I'm going to go into this workout and I'm not going to be able to work as hard as I did last time because I don't feel good. And then I'm not as strong as I was because I had a week off. And then I'm not just going to do it. And then we just talk ourselves in circles. Yeah. And then you end up doing nothing.
Oh, Gareth, you're just like, you're preaching everything that I say and think and talk about continuously, not just like, and personally, as well as, what I share with my clients as well. And that's the mental well-being piece to it. Right. And, being in the industry, we know that sort of the main ingredients are good sleep, exercise, and nutrition, but there's a lot of layers to that too, right? And so, especially, I love what you said about movement, and I've been having some really interesting conversations with my clients recently about just coming to yoga because it feels good and I want to feel good, not because I'm going to look good, and really recognizing. And then that goes all the way back to what we were talking about at the beginning about how yoga makes you more present, movement makes you more present. And so, when we can be more present in our movement, we're really concentrated on what it feels like, and letting go of, it's all just consistency. And
it comes back to that number one question, right? Like, what's the best exercise for this? What's the best workout for that? And the answer we give all the time is the one that just feels good for you. And it loops back to this again, right? The best, I'm doing air quotes if you're listening, not watching this on YouTube. The best exercise is something that you're going to do consistently, something that's going to bring you joy and pleasure.
Without question.
There is really actually nothing else to it. So whether that's yoga movement, it's dance movement, it's lifting weights, it's going for a walk with your dog, it doesn't actually matter. But it's about something that brings you joy, not, oh, I must do a workout, or seeing movement as punishment.
Right.
So find something you love.
I get excited on the days, like if I'm not teaching, on the couple mornings that I have off from not teaching, I'm like, am I going to go ride my bike today? Am I going to go take up the kayak? Am I going to do some weight training? I get all excited. What am I going to do? Because it's my special time, because I teach yoga so much that what am I going to do for the other part? Because that's what I really like to do, to really exercise, is lift weights and get on my bike and do some different cardio. But and then the yoga is the recovery and all the extra lovely stuff.
Yeah. So. I actually shared a post today that I really liked, and a shout out to Andrew Coates. So go follow him, anyone who's listening who isn't, but he has some incredible content. And the post he put out today that I loved was it was along the line, I'm going to paraphrase and butcher it, but along the lines of, you need to find movement, exercise, whatever you refer to it as, something that you enjoy and that brings you joy. But you also need to find joy in the exercise options that you have, which I thought was really powerful, because it's easy to say, oh, do something you love. And we're like, well, I don't like any of the things that are out there. So I think that comes back again to our expectation, right? So I can say, come into a hard strength workout and find joy in that. Find joy in that. Yeah, it's a struggle, but you know what? You did it really well, and you were mindful. And probably for that 45 minutes, you weren't thinking about all the other crap. As you alluded to earlier, and kind of finding that that kind of clarity and that focus. So you can find joy in those moments. It doesn't mean because you like the form of exercise that you're going to be. It's going to be, wow, another deadlift, another squat. Like we don't approach our workouts like that. But you find joy in it. Like,
3 more.
Struggle, right? You got to wrestle like the bar with another 5 pounds off the floor. There's joy in that because it's for me. I'm very geared by satisfaction. So it's
what I'm thinking about as you're saying that too is how and I go get body work done all the time, like chiropractors, massage, etc. And my chiropractor's like, what are you here for this time? And because there's always something going on, but I'm like, I exercise all the time. I kind of gave that argument up years ago because he's like, well, you're kind of old. I'm like, kind of old, kind of you, right? But the thing is that age is a fact of life, and yes, I have been moving and doing fitness most of my life. I'm really grateful for that. But I still, and then of course you add the chronic stress and the trauma and all that stuff. So there's a whole layer of extra chronic pain, and add some hormones, which are super fun for us ladies as we continue to get older. And those are extra fun. And for me, part of the issue that I'm having with hormones is a layer of tension and chronic pain. So that's why I really love those more gentle practices that I was describing before. But the thing is that just because you have a bit of pain and just because you might have an injury in one area of your body doesn't mean that you have to stop doing everything. You have to adjust, but you don't have to give it up. And an incredible story I have to just share. My mom is 74. She's pretty fragile. I could list all of the things going on, but let's just say she's very, very fragile. And her latest was she tripped over the rug at the dialysis clinic where she goes. And I'm actually shaking my head because this has happened. This is a common thing. She trips over her feet. And fell, unfortunately, and they called me. She's fallen. We're going to send her to the ER. She had a bump on her head, but it was fine. Everything was fine, but she's frail and she had a small fracture in her collarbone. And so they don't do anything for that because it's just a small fracture and they suggested the sling, but she doesn't really have any mobility in her shoulders anyways. So the sling's just making her feel stiffer. And she had just started, I gave her about a 30-minute chair yoga practice, and like a recording that I did last year. And so she had just gotten back into doing it every morning and going for walks with her walker. And she was just feeling stronger. And so the first thing she says when she comes home, she's like, well, there goes my exercising. And I'm like, Mom, it's just your collarbone. You can still do all the things for your legs. And so the next day she was pretty tired. The next day, still a little tired. Monday morning, she got up, came upstairs and said, I just did my exercise class. Fractured collarbone, bump on her head.
Good for her.
Yeah.
But I guess that's just to show that, there was things that she couldn't do, but there's already lots of things that she can't do. So she just kind of skipped that one side or skipped a couple of the exercises and kind of fast forward. That's the beauty of a little bit of recording. But we can do that. And when you are working out with people such as yourselves who give you permission to do that, that's really empowering. That's really, really empowering. And I think that's a big shift in how the fitness industry what's really happened, right? Because my mom does need to do stuff because she needs to keep climbing the stairs, because if she can't climb the stairs, she can't live in my basement anymore. So, well, I keep threatening to put a little seat up there for her, but she's also incredibly stubborn. But there's 4 steps to get out of my house. And I guess I could build in one of those big ramps out front of my house, but I really don't want to tear up my front lawn and my garden. So I'm like, you gotta do your leg exercises, Mom.
Yeah, no, she's doing great. And I love that, right? That whole shift in mindset. Let's celebrate what you can do.
Yeah.
right? Like, what can you do today? Because it's going to be a whole heap different than yesterday. And this is even if you don't have an injury, right? This is going back to the mental state.
Yep.
You know, each day is a little different. Each yoga practice will be different. Each time you pick up the barbell, it will be different, right? Like it's that is just life, and it's okay, right?
Yeah.
To not match the previous day. It's okay to be better. It's okay to be worse. It's okay to be the same. So just let that be, and just kind of, okay, what can I do today? Let's celebrate that. So yay, mom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's that's such it's a powerful story, and then what you just followed up, Nikki, is so important, because and I talk about this a lot, and I recorded an episode about it a while back, and it's about how we're going to bring up the word motivation, and how, you know, I put a clickbait episode that said motivation is fake, which is not really the message, but I just wanted people to listen to it. So if you haven't, go back. Yeah. Is that motivation is one of these things that we keep looking for before we do something. And that's not how it works. Just in case you didn't listen to the episode, or anyone listening, go back and listen. It happens when we do something, when we take an action. And then particularly the missing part there for me is when we celebrate that action. So I did something that was positive, and I moved towards something, because what it's geared to is that it's forward momentum with something. And I think what we're so stuck in is we're looking for motivation to do something. And then when we do it, we think we've got this linear line of progression, right, towards whatever we want to achieve. That's not how it works. As we just heard, some days it's going to be good. Some days it's not going to be so good. It's going to be the same as yesterday, worse than yesterday, better than yesterday. That's life. And it doesn't work like that. But when you celebrate, hey, I did it today, even though maybe I felt like crap and it didn't feel as good and I wasn't as strong, I still did it. And I'm going to celebrate that, because guess what? When you celebrate, you feel good. When you feel good, you do it again. And that's consistency, my friends. So there you go. It summarizes
Discipline.
everything.
That's another yoga lesson there. Discipline, tapas. It's one of the niyamas of yoga, discipline. And actually, that was the post that I put up today, was about from the sutras, which was about your practice being mild, medium, or intense. And it needs to be, you need to, again, I'm paraphrasing, stick to it for long periods of time to achieve success. So, you know, yoga didn't survive 6,000 years because it's a passing trend. Goat yoga might be a passing trend. But yoga is it's not a trend. It's a practice. It's a philosophy. So it's a philosophy of life and wellness. So it's pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
It is indeed.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to get started in some trauma-informed yoga, let's not go to Google and type in trauma-informed yoga. What should we be looking for there, Lisa?
Well, you can absolutely just put in lisagreenbaum.com and go to my website.
There you go. You understood the assignment.
Yep. And if you do go on my website, first of all, if you join my mailing list, you get a free gratitude ebook, which has some journaling exercises and some cool stories about how to find gratitude in different areas of your life. But also there is another tab that is free resources for mental health. And I have a couple YouTube videos and a couple articles that I've written. And then from there, of course, just start start practicing. So whether you take 5 minutes and just do some deep breathing, whether you want to, whether you're ready to start joining a class, I think everybody in the whole universe can do yoga. It's just about finding the right yoga. And those myths about touching toes, like, again, it's just plain dumb. It's stupid, because it has nothing to do with that at all. If my mom can do yoga with her fractured collarbone, anybody can really do yoga. And then, of course, depending on, if you are like me and just love education and can't stop and just kind of want to keep going down the rabbit hole, then then of course my classes are listed up there. So, and for my training, the way I've actually created my so I say 200 and I say it sort of loosely. So 200 hours is, if you wanted to become a yoga teacher, the sort of fundamental, the foundation is to get 200 hours of teaching or 200 hours of education. And every school will kind of set that up slightly differently. And what I've done is I've got 5 modules of training. The first module is history and philosophy. So a lot of things that I've been kind of sharing about what yoga really is, that's where that all comes from. So that just really deepens your knowledge about, what this whole thing is, so that when you actually start practicing the poses, that even just feels different in the body. So first module is history and philosophy of yoga. It's all theory based. We're going to do some meditating, but it's pretty much all theory. 5 days, 2 weekends. Second module is pose breakdown biomechanics. So now we're really looking at, okay, we do love the practice of yoga. We love the movements. We love the poses. So how can we do them safely and correctly? The third module is what I like to call the woohoo stuff of yoga. So this is when we get really dug deep. Yeah, I'll get you in there one day. I get everybody at some point. Trust me. It's just, knock, knock. Hey, Lisa, remember that training?
Yeah,
I've got a long list of people I never expected to show up at yoga that have. So you'll be there one day. Anyways, chakras, breathing practices, meditation. And I say the woohoo stuff, but it's really understanding how the energy shifts and how we can play with the energy shifts that happen in yoga. And then the fourth module is the trauma-informed certificate. So it's a 6-day training that will teach you how to become trauma-informed. It teaches you the practice that I was describing, which I refer to as either a calm space class or yin and restore. And there's also a component of working with mental well-being. So creating practices to balance anxiety and depression and work with chronic pain. So that's all in that fourth module. And then the fifth one is teaching skills. So that's really looking at sequencing and cueing. And that's just the order that I created. But the first 4 trainings, only the fifth one, the teaching skills, you have to take the other trainings to do that one. But for the first 4 modules, anything that interests you, you can just take. Again, that's why it's a yoga education school, because I want more people to really understand the power that yoga has and how it can make such a beautiful impact in our lives. So if any of those things piqued some curiosity, there's definitely some information there. And I'm always happy and willing to jump on a Zoom or jump on a call and talk more about it. Because if there's anything I like to do, it's talk about yoga. Anybody that knows me knows that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for talking about yoga and other stuff, right?
Yes.
With us this evening. And I kind of love that last note that you left us on, right? Which is just, yoga isn't just about those movements. It really can change your life. And, I personally didn't do yoga for the longest time. Wasn't ready, I guess. Now I look back, I understand that, and then became ready. And it changed not only my approach to my job, let's just say the fitness industry, but my relationships with people around me, friends, family, how I viewed myself, and just conducted myself. So it was a huge shift for me, and continues to be a huge shift for me. And that was many, many years ago. So I just want to say thank you again for getting me with the woo woo. I was clearly on that list. But seriously, I think you do have to be ready for it, and you'll absorb what you need at that time, and then you'll kind of circle back and maybe pick some more pieces up. And and that's the beautiful part of it, is there's just so much to immerse yourself in. Yeah. So thank you for being a wonderful mentor and friend, and
well, thank you for being a wonderful mentor and friend too.
Thank you.
I'm so excited. I love what you guys do. I love everything that you've done for Nock Academy. I remember when you launched, and I think I sent you both emails going, finally, yay.
Oh, well, thank you. That means a lot. And I guess the last thank you is for everyone tuning in and that listened today. We know you got a lot of great information. Lisa mentioned where you can find out more, but it'll also be in the show notes. So it'll just be one simple click on your device to check out all of the extra info you need. And you know what else is really easy and simple to do is to share this episode and leave us a review. It's also just a couple of second job. So please feel free to do that if you've got something from this episode, because we love the support and it gets the message out to more people. That's it for today's episode. And thank you both for being here with me. And thank you everyone for listening. We will catch you on the next show.